The book of Genesis tells us that the first descendant of Abraham to arrive in Egypt was his great-grandson, Joseph, the son of Jacob. Joseph's brothers had sold him as a slave to a caravan of traders who brought him down to Egypt. Then, in an amazing turn of events, he rises to become the highest official in Egypt. He saves the country from a terrible famine, enables his father Jacob and his entire family to settle in the best part of the land, a place called Goshen.
Who is Joseph?
Well, Joseph is a Western Asiatic character, a Semitic-speaking person who has entered Egypt, as the story tells us, and he becomes a slave. He's brought into Egypt and sold into slavery. And for some amazing reason, he becomes the highest official in the land. He's only second to Pharaoh, as far as power is concerned. And he managed to achieve this by foretelling or explaining the dreams of Pharaoh, dreams that Pharaoh's having, sort of nightmares about cattle coming out of the waters of the Nile. As first of all 7 fat cows, and then 7 lean cows come out and devour the fat cows. It's an extraordinary story. But the clue here is that these cows are coming out of the Nile. It's the Nile itself which is the cause of both the plenty and the famine.
I'm curious, you used the word Semite.
Yeah.
Is it Semitic, Semite?
Yeah.
Explain that.
A Semite is somebody who speaks a Semitic language. In the modern world, that means the Israelis and the Arabs, for instance. In the ancient world, it meant the Israelites, because the Israelites spoke a Semitic language, so we call them Semites.
Mm-hmm. But are there other groups that are Semites as well in the ancient world?
Of course, the Assyrians were, the Babylonians were. The Egyptians weren't. They didn't speak a Semitic language. Mm-hmm. But those people who spoke Semitic languages are called Semites.
Mm-hmm. And Joseph was a Semite.
Joseph was a Semite.
But at the time, he was not an Israelite. He was a Semite.
Well, the question of when the Israelites appear in history is quite well explained in the Bible. The Israelites are the sons of Jacob. Mm-hmm. So Joseph is an Israelite. Okay, but the Israelites only begin then.
Because he was a son of Israel.
Yes, Israel is Jacob.
Mm-hmm. So once Jacob's name turned to Israel, they became sons of Israel.
Exactly, and those 12 sons are the founding fathers of the Israelite nation.
And the 12 tribes.
And the 12 tribes.
If you were to describe Joseph, what type of a character is he?
Well, as a young boy, I think he's quite brash. I think he's got a bit of an ego, if you like. He's the favorite of his father. He's given this multicolored coat, which none of the other sons have got. So they become jealous of him. So I think he's quite an arrogant young man. But when he's, of course, sent into slavery into Egypt, his character changes.
What happened to him?
He's thrown in prison.
Why? How did he get to Egypt?
Well, the other brothers throw him down a well to keep him where he is, and then they take this multicolored coat and they cover it with goat's blood, and they take it to the father, Jacob, and say the boy is being killed by a lion. So the father then mourns, and they give him to Midianite traders who sell him into slavery in Egypt. They take him all the way to Egypt and sell him into slavery.
Egypt plays a very important role in the trade from the ancient Near East. Egypt was the Nile was a conduit of African luxury goods coming north, such as ivory and ebony, high-quality woods, myrrh, incense. These things came from Africa and Arabia. And so the idea of traders moving back and forth between ancient Canaan and Egypt has been going on since the end of the 4th millennium BC. So the idea that Joseph would have been brought to Egypt by slave traders, they were probably not slave traders, they were bringing other things with them. In fact, the Bible even tells us they had balm and other products of the land of Canaan. So the slave trade part of it was just one facet of a much larger trade network that was going on at that time.
If we go back to Beni Hassan and talk about that tomb painting.
Sure.
Let's talk a bit about that.
The famous painting in the tomb of Khnum-Hotep at Beni Hassan shows a group of 37, we're told, A'amu. These are Semitic-speaking foreigners who've come to Egypt. They were probably engaged in trade. They were specifically in Egypt to do mining and metalworking and so on. There are pictures of their bellows, for their stoking up the fires, for their smelting work, and so on. So we do know that foreigners were coming into Egypt at different periods of time, and so the idea of a family like Jacob, an extended family, moving into Egypt for hardship or economic reasons is not unparalleled. These sort of things did happen.
Have you seen any other collaboration in history about famine in Egypt outside of Egypt? What I'm suggesting that people from outside of Egypt traveled to Egypt.
We have examples on the tomb paintings from the Middle Kingdom of people arriving in Egypt, but they're not associated with famine necessarily, they're associated more with trade. So for instance at Beni Hassan you get these Asiatics or Western Asiatic peoples, Semitic speaking peoples, arriving in Egypt with their multicolored coats on, and they're trading eye makeup. And it's exactly at the same time that we have the arrival of the Asiatics at Avaris. People arriving, maybe 30 or 40 people at a time with donkeys, appearing in Egypt, coming across Sinai, arriving in Egypt, and they are foreigners. They're from the north.
So there's a tendency to show that obviously trade was happening, but the question I had was, is there any specific for grain? Do you see grain trade happening in any other outside source?
I have no example of that I can think of. However, remember the story of Jacob coming into Egypt. He's invited by Joseph, the vizier, who's been given permission by Pharaoh to bring him into the land. So it's not a matter of trade we're dealing with here, or grain transport. It's a matter of people in the north starving because of famine and being invited into the rich land of Egypt to survive.
Is the story of Joseph even feasible in Egyptian culture?
The biblical story of Joseph is one of the most intriguing ones in the Bible. There is no direct archaeological evidence that would help us say, yes, this is Joseph in history and space and time as we know it. But what the Egyptological evidence can do is flesh out the picture, provide the context, provide background information that enables us to look at the story of Joseph and say, yes, this rings true. Let me give you a few examples. Number one, there is the fact that Joseph is sold into Egypt as a slave for 20 shekels of silver. Studies have been done and shown that this was the price of slaves in the early part of the second millennium BC. As time went on, by the time you get to the second half of the second millennium BC, the price of slaves is going up to 30 shekels, and on as we go in time, inflation sets in, the price of slaves gets higher. So the very fact that the asking price for Joseph, 20 shekels of silver, fits that unique window of time between 1500 BC and 1800 BC. Another case might be that Joseph comes to Egypt to work in the household of a high-ranking and important official. We know this sort of thing was going on in Egypt. We have a papyrus, it's now in the Brooklyn Museum, that contains the names of foreign servants, many of them having Semitic names, like Joseph's name. This comes from the 18th century BC, roughly the time of Joseph, and these servants worked in the house of an Egyptian master. And even the title of some of these in Egyptian, hairy pair, those who are over the house, is precisely what Joseph is when he works for Potiphar. He is over the house of Potiphar. So we do know that there were foreign slaves, servants working in the homes of upper-class Egyptians in the early second millennium BC.